One of the biggest problems with modern first-person shooters is the lack of innovation. Developers are too afraid to reach outside of military-themed shooters. That's why for me, in order to get a good first-person shooter, I look to good old games and I look to the past. Enter Aquinox. Released in 2001, it was developed by Massive Development and published by Fish Tank Interactive. Unique to this game was the fact that it was an underwater shooter. You don't really see too many of that nowadays or even back then. Even though it took the first person shooter genre and put it into something else, is this game worth buying or playing? Well, we'll take a look as we go through the graphics, audio, and of course the most important part of any game, the gameplay. Let's start off with the graphics, and since this game was made in 2001, those are the standards that we will be using. Simply put, this is one of the best looking games of 2001, and I'm not even running on the highest settings. So if I did, this would look absolutely breathtaking. The atmosphere is one of the game's biggest strengths. It's dark, brooding, and it has a nice green hue over everything. The graphics add a somewhat of a mystery element into the atmosphere and into the game as well. So enough about the atmosphere and the environment. What about everything? In short, everything else is also top notch. With the right hardware capabilities, this game runs at a very smooth 60 frames per second. Even when there's a lot of things going out, a bunch of explosions, a bunch of ships going on, it maintains its frame rate. Not only that, but the explosions look great, and the bullets that you fire look fantastic. Every gun and bullet looks different from each other, so this adds to the futuristic flair that the game is going for. As well as the character models looking great, and the environments and all that looking amazing. I can't say the same really for the cutscenes. Compared to the rest of the game, the cutscenes are lacking from a visual standpoint. It seems like the cutscenes were at a lower resolution compared to the rest of the game, and because of this, they look kind of blurry on bigger monitors. Overall, the graphics are amazing, and this is why the final score for the graphics is a 9 out of 10. This is one of the best looking games of 2001, and if it wasn't for the cutscenes, this would have got a 10 out of 10. Now on to the audio, and I would like to start off with the positives. For the good things done right, the music is very atmospheric. When you're not doing much and you're just going through, the music is nice, soft, and quiet, but when the battle gets intense, the music turns up. Now for the soundtrack, it mostly consists of electronic music, which is perfect for the type of game. Since this game takes place in the future, it certainly fits the atmosphere. The sound effects are loud and impactful, but to me they're a bit too loud. They get in the way of overshadowing everything else. I mean, I don't mind if they overshadow the voiceovers, because we'll get into that later. But to overshadow the good music is really a negative to me. And now, I dread this moment, but we have to talk about the voice acting.
Shut up.
Oh
Harry.
God, the
I didn't
voice
say a
acting.
word.
Just because. I don't want to hear anything about.
The hero got his ship stolen by a handful of bored neo-yuppies.
Have hearts colder than a dead politician. Talk to Shakti. She's a star woman at Atrox and responsible for loading the jump ships.
And please don't get me started
Hi,
on your
Flint.
computer AI.
Where is my Zuka bus? What kind of wreck are you hauling my circuits around in? Holy mackerel. Do you remember the high-up a couple of years ago? Just before the Bionts came on the scene? That was awful. But this tin can. Couldn't you have asked El Topo if we could get the high-up?
The voice acting is bad. I wouldn't mind it so much if people weren't talking that much, but they don't only do that previous battle, they do it during the battle and after as well. There is so much dialogue that you'll just end up skipping it. The story is not even worth it anyway. The story sucks, so you can just skip over all this. I mean, I guess there's one positive to the voice acting. It's not as bad as Empire Earth 3. You know how much I hated that voice acting. With the great music, some decent sound effects, and the horrible voice acting, this gets a 5 out of 10 for audio. The music is great, and the sound effects, even though they overshadow the music, they're pretty satisfying to hear, especially coming from the machine gun and the laser gun as well. However, the deal breaker to me is the horrible voice acting. It's something I just cannot overlook. Probably if there was very little voice acting to begin with, but there is a lot of it and there's a lot of dialogue, so it really gets annoying. And now onto the gameplay. The gameplay consists of a single player and multiplayer mode. In that single player mode, you have instant action and story mode. Most of your time will probably be spent in story mode. Here in story mode, you talk to various people, there's a bunch of different people, a lot of it is pointless dialogue, which you'll realize that early on, so you can skip most of it. Before every mission, you can go to the shop, equip your weapons, buy a new ship, so on and so forth. You earn money by completing missions. In terms of the missions, the game is very linear, so almost everyone will play the same missions. Who have played this game will play the same missions that you have. As I said in the beginning of this video, this game is an underwater first-person shooter. Because of this, it plays somewhat like a space simulator game. However, there are a few unique things that are used in this game. For example, throughout some of the missions, you have to use the currents to your advantage. You do this by turning off your engine and letting the current guide you to your destination, and by doing this, you avoid alerting any of the enemies nearby. This concept is actually really cool, and I wish they expanded upon it. Also, it's only used in a few missions, so it rarely comes into play, but when it does, it's very enjoyable and gives a little bit of stealth and varies the gameplay as well. So when you play the story mode, you start out in a beat up ship and it really sucks. The reason being is because your ship was stolen, so because of that you have to start from the bottom. At the beginning you don't really have that many good weapons, you only have one gun that you can use, and a few torpedoes here and there. The game is also absurdly easy when you begin. You basically go around destroying trash, you don't even have any opposition. In terms of mission variety, each mission has a different set of objectives. Some missions you have to follow and tail certain vehicles, other ones you have to stay hidden for a certain amount of time. But the majority of missions unfortunately involve protecting people. Either it's a ship that can't defend itself, if it's a huge ship that's getting attacked by millions of ships, or your companions. When it comes to your companions and your squad mates, they can well enough hold their own. Not only do you not have to worry about them too much, but they can actually get kills and can make the mission a lot easier for you. So it's in your best interest to make sure that they stay alive, even though you really don't have to pay too much attention on them. So enough about the mission structure and the content that this game has. What about the mechanics? For one, this game plays like a space simulator, so if you're not too familiar with that, this will take some time to get adjusted to. Now for some reason in this game, I felt like the aiming was too finicky. You had to be very precise on what you hit, especially when going against fast moving targets. Even though they appear in your crosshairs, if you take the shot, you're gonna miss because you have to get them on their exact angle. This is very frustrating at first, but after some time you really get used to the controls. For weapons, there's a huge variety of them. You have your laser weapons, your plasma weapons, and your regular machine weapons, your conventional weapons. Not only that, but you also have torpedoes that you can use, and you also have EMP weapons which are used to disable ships instead of outright destroying them. EMP weapons play a huge role in the game. Sometimes I feel like their role is a bit too big. I'd rather be seeing blasting people and just seeing the explosions rather than trying to disable them. This is done in a lot of missions where you can't kill people because they're civilians, or you just have to paralyze something and stop it from moving so you can get a ship to come land on it. As you progress through the game, you unlock new weapons, and you also unlock new ships as well. This is pretty good since it gives you motivation to complete the story if it starts to get a bit repetitive, because you'll be wanting to get the next ship and the next weapon, because you always get better weapons as you progress. While the game gets repetitive towards the later portions, there is a good enemy variety to keep mixing things up. The game shifts from fighting humans and soldiers to fighting creatures and a bunch of crazy things in the end. But here are my problems with the gameplay. The story is flat out garbage, and sometimes there is just too much downtime between the missions. You just have to end up skipping all the conversations because you just want to get to the fighting. It also doesn't help that not only the voice acting is bad, as I said before in the audio, but none of what they say matters. The game is strictly linear, and that bugs me. I wish there were like side missions or optional objectives or things like in that nature. I wish there was more involved with freelancing and finding new contacts and just being an open-ended game. That would have been awesome. When you go to new cities, I wish it came like an open world that you were able to just go and explore the world of Aquinox instead of just being a cutscene that is just boring, filled with boring talking and just too much narration and a monotone voice. It really just pushes the linearity when the only way to get to city is to do a mission or to watch one of these boring cutscenes. The only good thing about these cutscenes is when they're over, you've unlocked new weapons and new ships. With everything put together, the gameplay isn't horrible. There are a lot of fun things to explore, a lot of cool things that the game has to offer. However, it starts to get repetitive towards the later stages of the game, and it doesn't do too much to mix itself up. Also, the linearity really bothers me. You literally have zero control over anything or the actions of your characters, and it really sucks because I can't stand some of the decisions that my character makes. Speaking of that, your character makes a lot of out-of-character choices. Either way, Aquinox gets a 6 out of 10 for gameplay. The game does a lot of things right, don't get me wrong, but this game could have been a lot better if it offered extra side missions, some freelancing missions, have secondary paths or something like that. Then it would have made the game better and much more enjoyable as a result. There was a lot of wasted potential here. Overall, there's not much else to say. This is a very enjoyable arcade shooter. It's a good time playing, but it's not something that you'll remember or really come back to every now and then. It's worth at least one playthrough, and because of that, I'll give this game a 7 out of 10. It's a good game. There's a lot of things that this game does right, such as the fast-paced gameplay and also the atmosphere as well. However, the hammy voice acting and really, the lack of lasting appeal really hurt this game in the long run. Now, if you guys enjoyed this video, please support me on Patreon, and as always, this is Pow3rh0use signing off.